The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives with its own immutable power, one that has never known the word magic? No portal of swirling flame heralded his arrival. No phoenix song or crack of apparition marked the moment. The sky above Little Hangleton simply tore, a wound of violet lightning splitting the November clouds. And through it fell a shape too large, too dark, too deliberate to be anything born of this world. Villagers 3 miles off would later swear they'd seen a falling star. They were wrong. It was a man, if the word still applied to what remained of him, encased in black durasteel, his descent controlled, his cape snapping like a banner of war as he dropped the last 100 feet and struck the frost-hardened earth with a boom that cracked stone. Darth Vader rose from the small crater without hurry, servos hissing, the mechanical rasp of his breathing the only sound in the sudden silence. Behind him, the rift sealed itself with a final crackle of dimensional static, severing his only known path back to the Empire, back to the Emperor, back to everything he understood as reality. He did not panic. Panic was a luxury Anakin Skywalker had died screaming for, and Darth Vader did not indulge dead men's weaknesses. His helmet's internal sensors flickered, confused. No hyperspace lanes registered. No comm relays. No Imperial transponder codes anywhere in range. And yet, the Force. It was here. Thinner in some places, thicker in others. Coiled strangely around this world like a second, half-formed nervous system layered over the one he knew. Something in this galaxy answered to intention, and will in ways that felt achingly familiar, and yet fundamentally alien. As if the Force itself had been diluted, fractured, and handed piecemeal to millions of small, squabbling hands. He began walking. The ruined manor on the hill radiated something dark and old, a resonance in this world's strange energy that reminded him, distantly, of a Sith temple's lingering malice. It called to him, and Vader had never been one to ignore power's summons. I am here for a reason, he thought, already recalculating his mission parameters. The Emperor's final transmission before the rift. Generator activated echoed in his memory. Somewhere beyond our galaxy lies a power older than the Sith, an answer to death itself. Find it, bring it home, or bring the Empire the means to build one. The Emperor's obsession with cheating. Death was nothing new to Vader. He had lived inside that obsession for 20 years, had been half murdered and rebuilt into this breathing coffin because of it. If this new galaxy held secrets of true immortality, the Sith would possess them, whatever the cost to the natives who currently held them. He reached the manor's iron gate. Wards flared to life around the property, magical wards, though he had no name for them yet. Only the sensation of invisible walls pressing against his mind, testing him, searching for intention. He extended his hand. The Force rolled outward from him like a dark tide, not asking permission from whatever crude magical architecture had been layered into these stones. The wards resisted, actual resistance. Something Vader had rarely felt from any obstacle since his fall to the dark side. And then, with a groan of tortured energy, they cracked. Inside, a figure in dark robes spun toward him, wand raised, pale face contorted with fury and disbelief. Who dares? Vader did not recognize the man's face. He would learn later this was Bertha Jorkin's killer, a low Death Eater tasked with maintaining the Riddle House's perimeter. It did not matter. The man shouted a word, Avada, Cadavra, and a bolt of sickly green light lanced across the room. Vader raised his hand almost lazily. The Force closed around the curse's trajectory and shoved. The green bolt veered sideways, punched through the manor's ancient stone wall, and vanished into the night. The Death Eater stared, his wand arm shaking, as the black-armored giant crossed the room in 3 unhurried strides and closed a gloved fist around his throat, not with hands, not truly, but with will alone, lifting the man a foot off the ground on nothing but focused rage given shape. Your death curse, Vader said, voice a mechanical rasp scraping through the modulator, means nothing to a will stronger than your own. He studied the man's terror with clinical detachment. Fear was useful. Fear was information. You will tell me what power lives in this world. You will tell me of artifacts that conquer death. And you will not lie to me, because I will know. The Death Eater, gasping, gave him a single word before consciousness fled him. Hallows. Vader let the body drop. He did not yet know the shape of the war he had fallen into. The boy with the lightning scar. The Dark Lord clawing his way back to a body. The old wizard who watched the world through half-moon spectacles, and already 300 miles away in a stone office lined with silver instruments, felt something enormous and cold ripple across the fabric of magic itself. He did not know these things yet, but he had a word. Hallows. And Darth Vader had never once, in all his years of service to the dark side, failed to hunt down what he sought. The Ministry of Magic's response came slower than it should have. By the time the Department of Magical Law Enforcement received the first fragmented reports, an unregistered magical disturbance in Little Hangleton, a dead Death Eater found with no visible curse mark, only bruised, crushed cartilage in his throat as though strangled by an invisible hand. 3 days had already passed. Cornelius Fudge, still clinging to denial about Voldemort's return, initially dismissed it as an internal power struggle among known dark wizards. It was Amelia Bones, head of magical law enforcement, who insisted on a full Auror deployment. They found Vader in a clearing outside the village, meditating in a way that made no sense to wizarding sensibilities. Not with wand or incantation, but simply sitting, armored and motionless, his presence radiating outward like heat from a dying star. The 12 Aurors who surrounded him did so with practiced efficiency, wands raised, stunning spells already forming on their lips. "You are surrounded," called the lead Auror, a broad-shouldered woman named Savage. "Identify yourself and surrender your wand." Vader opened his eyes, or rather, the twin red sensors of his mask seemed to focus, though nothing on his face could be called an eye any longer. He rose without visible effort, cape settling around him like a shadow given form. "I carry no wand," he said. "I have no need of one." Savage's team exchanged uncertain glances. No wand meant, by every wizarding metric they understood, no magic. A muggle, perhaps, dangerous only in the mundane sense. But the report of the dead Death Eater, throat crushed by no physical hand, argued otherwise. "Last warning," Savage said. "Stand down." Vader's response was to extend one hand, palm open, unhurried. Stupefy erupted from 6 wands simultaneously, red light converging on him from every angle. He did not dodge. He did not need to. The force gathered around him in a visible distortion, a rippling curtain of raw will, and the spell simply stopped, hanging suspended for one impossible heartbeat before Vader closed his fist. The stunning charms collapsed inward and dissipated like smoke pulled into a furnace. The Aurors stared. Several took an involuntary step back. In the wizarding world, magic without visible wand work was the stuff of legend, of Merlin, of ancient blood magic, of things no living witch or wizard should be able to do. "I am not here for your ministry," Vader said, his voice carrying an authority that needed no volume to command a room. "I am not here for your war. I search for an artifact, 3 artifacts, perhaps, that your kind calls the Deathly Hallows. Direct me to those who know of them, and I will trouble you no further." Savage's wand hand trembled, though her voice held steady. "The Deathly Hallows are a children's story, a myth." "Then your myths kill Death Eaters with their bare will," Vader replied. "And I would advise you to reconsider what you believe to be fiction." It was the wrong thing to say to a room full of trained law enforcement, already primed for violence. Savage barked an order, and the clearing erupted, not stunning spells this time, but a barrage of more serious curses, bone breakers and binding hexes, and one reckless young Auror's ill-advised attempt at a cutting curse aimed at Vader's throat. Vader moved. It was not fast in the way a Jedi's blur of motion might be fast. It was inevitable. The same crushing certainty of a Star Destroyer altering course, unstoppable once begun. He caught the cutting curse in an outstretched palm, the spell's edge fracturing harmlessly against a shield of condensed force energy the Aurors had no name for. His crimson lightsaber ignited with a sound like tearing silk, the blade humming, casting the clearing in hellish red light. 2 Aurors who pressed the attack found their curses simply deflected by the blade itself, the plasma cutting through conjured stone barriers as though they were parchment. Vader did not kill them, not yet. He needed information more than he needed corpses. Instead, He used the Force to sweep 3 Aurors from their feet in a single contemptuous gesture, sending them crashing into the treeline, and closed the distance on Savage, herself with a speed that defied her every instinct. About what no one should mean. His gloved hand closed around her wrist before her next spell could form. Not crushing, not yet. A warning. I grow tired of this galaxy's reflexive violence, Vader said. Where are the Hallows? Savage, to her credit, did not break immediately, but the pressure on her wrist increased by degrees. A slow promise of pain that made her wand clatter from numbed fingers. The Peveril brothers, she gasped. Old story, a cloak, a stone, a wand. The Elder Wand is real, it's passed through history. Through duelists, nobody knows where it is now. Please. Vader released her. She collapsed, cradling her wrist, staring up at him with the particular terror reserved for things that should not exist. The Elder Wand, Vader repeated, testing the name. Somewhere in this galaxy's tangled history, there might be a weapon worthy of the Sith's ambitions, an artifact of power, passed hand to hand, killer to killer. Exactly the kind of dark lineage the Sith Order itself was built upon. He turned from the fallen Aurors, cape billowing, already calculating his next move. Somewhere in this world was a headmaster who had felt his arrival ripple across the magical currents like a stone through still water. Somewhere was a dark lord clawing his way back from near death. Obsessed, Vader would soon learn, with the very same prize. The hunt had barely begun, and already, the wizarding world would never look at power the same way again. Albus Dumbledore felt it before any report reached him. It arrived not as sound or vision, but as a disturbance in the ambient magic of the world itself, a cold, heavy pressure that rolled across Britain like a held breath, present in the trembling of portraits at Hogwarts, in the restless stirring of the centaurs in the Forbidden Forest, in Fawkes' sudden agitated cry from his perch in the headmaster's office. The Phoenix's song, usually a comfort, came out fractured and sharp, a warning song Dumbledore had heard only twice before in his long life. He set down his tea and moved to the window overlooking the grounds, his half-moon spectacles catching the gray afternoon light. Something has entered our world, he murmured to the empty office, and it did not come through any door magic has ever built. By the time Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus arrived, a silver lynx, bearing frantic word of the Little Hangleton incident, of Aurors defeated by a wandless assailant wielding a blade of pure crimson light, Dumbledore had already begun making preparations. He summoned Minerva McGonagall, Severus Snape, and, after a moment's hesitation, sent word to Remus Lupin as well. This was not a matter for the Order's usual caution. This was something new. A being who needs no wand, McGonagall said, pacing before the fireplace in Dumbledore's office that evening, who deflects the killing curse as though swatting a fly, who wields a blade forged of light itself. Albus, what is this thing? I do not yet know, Dumbledore admitted, and the admission cost him visibly. In 40 years of confronting the darkest corners of magic, precious few mysteries had left him without at least a working theory. But I felt his arrival, Minerva, felt it the way one feels a stone dropped into still water. Except this stone did not merely disturb the surface. It cracked something beneath it. Snape, silent until now, spoke with characteristic bluntness. You believe this creature to be more dangerous than the Dark Lord. I believe, Dumbledore said carefully, that whatever power this being commands does not originate from our world's magic at all. It resembles it, enough to interact with our spells, our wards, even, perhaps, our curses, but the source is foreign, ancient in a way that predates even the founding of Hogwarts. And power that old, Severus, is rarely benevolent by accident. He moved to the shelf where a small stone basin sat, its surface swirling with silvery light, the pensive, though he did not yet have a memory worth depositing. Instead, he retrieved an old, leather-bound book, worn soft at the corners, the tales of Beetle the Bard, the Death Eater killed in Little Hangleton, Dumbledore continued, opening the book to a familiar, well-thumbed page. Spoke a single word before he died. Kingsley's contact within the ministry confirms it. Hallows. McGonagall's brow furrowed. The children's tale? Albus, surely you don't believe. I believe, Dumbledore said, that this creature is hunting for the Deathly Hallows. And I believe, given what little we know of his power, that he may actually be capable of finding them, or worse, of forcing others to help him find them, as he apparently attempted with our ministry's finest today. The weight of that realization settled over the room. The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility, three objects of terrible power, said to grant their possessor mastery over death itself. Dumbledore alone among them knew precisely how real that myth was, for he alone knew the true history of the Elder Wand's bloody lineage, and he alone carried, tucked within his robes at that very moment, the invisibility cloak that had once belonged to James Potter, a Peveril heirloom passed down through generations, real beyond any doubt. He said nothing of this to the others. Not yet. There is worse, Snape said quietly. If this creature's arrival has disturbed the ambient magic as significantly as you describe, the Dark Lord will have felt it too. Voldemort is obsessed with matters of death and its conquest. He will not ignore a rumor of power that promises exactly what he seeks. Dumbledore's expression darkened. Then we may soon find ourselves observers to a collision between two hunters of immortality, each convinced their claim to power supersedes the others. That is a war Britain's wizarding population cannot survive as bystanders. What do you propose? McGonagall asked. First, Dumbledore said, closing the book gently, we determine what this being truly is, friend, foe, or force of nature indifferent to both labels. Second, we ensure that whatever remains of the true Hallows stays beyond his reach, and beyond Voldemort's, for as long as we are able. His gaze flickered, briefly, toward the window, toward the distant lights of Gryffindor Tower, where a 15-year-old boy with a lightning-shaped scar was, at that very moment, entirely unaware that he had just become the fulcrum of a war between three claimants to Death's dominion. And if negotiation fails? Snape asked. If this creature cannot be reasoned with. Dumbledore's eyes, usually so warm behind their spectacles, went cold and ancient as the castle stones around them. Then we discover, he said quietly, whether the wisdom of this world's oldest magic can stand against whatever darkness he has carried with him from wherever he came. I confess, Severus, for the first time in many years, I do not know the answer. Outside, far beyond the wards of Hogwarts, Darth Vader walked the roads of rural England beneath a bruised evening sky, the Force whispering names and locations into his mind with every step. Godric's Hollow, Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, a map of power slowly assembling itself before him. He did not yet know the boy's name. He did not yet know the old man watched him from a castle tower, with the particular dread of someone who has survived too many wars to welcome another. But he would know soon enough. And when Darth Vader wanted answers, the galaxy, any galaxy, inevitably provided them. Lord Voldemort received the news of little Hangleton with something dangerously close to delight. He had been rebuilding his strength for months now, his fractured soul knitting itself back into a body through blood magic and ritual, and the patient. You will do nothing so crude. Bellatrix, Voldemort's voice carried the particular chill that preceded punishment for those who misunderstood him. A creature capable of shrugging off the killing curse is not brought anywhere in chains. No, we will observe first, learn what we can of his power, and if his purpose truly aligns with mine. A slow, terrible smile crossed his serpentine features. Then perhaps we need not be enemies at all. Lucius, ever the diplomat even in the presence of madness, spoke carefully. My lord, if this being seeks the Hallows for himself, an alliance seems unlikely to hold. Every alliance holds precisely as long as it serves both parties. Voldemort replied. I have spent 13 years denied my body, denied my due, clawing back from a fate that should have destroyed me utterly. I understand better than any wizard alive what it means to cheat death, Lucius. If this stranger has knowledge, resources, power I do not yet possess, power capable of matching, perhaps even exceeding, my own, then I would be a fool not to at least measure the worth of his cooperation before I measure the worth of his corpse. He rose, robes whispering across the floor, and moved to the window. Outside, the graveyard stretched pale and quiet beneath the moon, the very ground where his own resurrection had been purchased. With Harry Potter's blood and Pettigrew's severed hand, he understood sacrifice. He understood the terrible mathematics of immortality. "Send word through our contacts in the ministry," he said. "I want to know everything about this creature, his movements, his methods, anything the Aurors managed to learn before their humiliation." And Bellatrix, his eyes cut toward her. "You will not engage him directly. Not yet. I want him watched, not provoked. We do not yet know the shape of what we're dealing with." Bellatrix's disappointment was palpable, but decades of service had taught her when Voldemort's patience was not to be tested. She inclined her head. "As you wish, my lord. There is something else," Voldemort continued, half to himself now, his mind already turning over strategic possibilities with the same cold precision he'd once applied to his transformation into something more than merely mortal. The Elder Wand. If this creature seeks it as fervently as our fallen brother suggested, then he threatens to disturb a hunt I myself have only just begun to consider seriously. His fingers drifted, unconsciously, to the yew wand at his side. Ollivander's craftsmanship, twin to Potter's, but suddenly, in light of legends half remembered from his own days combing Hogwarts' restricted section as a student, feeling insufficient, the Elder Wand, unbeatable in every recorded duel throughout history, a weapon that had passed from murderer to murderer across centuries, always seeking a stronger hand. If such a thing existed, if it could truly be found, claimed, wielded, it would render every enemy Voldemort had ever feared obsolete, Dumbledore included. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "our armored visitor and I want precisely the same thing, and perhaps only one of us will be permitted to have it." He turned back to his assembled followers, his expression settling into the mask of cold command they all feared. "We will not chase this creature blindly like frightened Aurors. We will let him do the difficult work. Let him tear through the Ministry's defenses. Let him draw out whatever protections Dumbledore has hidden around the true Hallows. If the old fool truly knows where they lie, and when the path is clear, when the prize is within reach." His smile widened, thin and reptilian. "Then we will see whether his power is truly equal to mine, or whether it merely appears so to those too frightened to test it properly." Bellatrix laughed, sharp and delighted. Lucius said nothing, his expression carefully neutral, though the flicker of unease in his eyes betrayed a very reasonable fear that his master had just described, without apparently realizing it. The opening moves of a war between two immortals in waiting, and that everyone else in the room was destined to become collateral damage in whatever came next. Outside, far to the north, Darth Vader continued his march toward Hogwarts, unaware that he had just become the single most interesting variable in Lord Voldemort's calculations for war, and that the Dark Lord's patience, unlike Vader's own considerable restraint, had a very short and violent shelf life. The wizarding underworld learned within 72 hours what the Ministry had already discovered at great cost. Reasoning with the armored stranger was optional. Answering his questions was not. Vader made his way through Nocturne Alley in the dead of night, his presence alone enough to send the usual nocturnal traffic of hex peddlers and black market alchemists scattering into doorways and shadowed alcoves. He did not need stealth. He had tried subtlety once in Little Hangleton and found this world's inhabitants responded better to demonstrations of consequence than to diplomacy. Borgin and Burke's, the shop that traded in cursed artifacts and darker histories than most wizards cared to acknowledge, proved his most useful stop. Mr. Borgin himself, a stooped and oily man well practiced in surviving encounters with dangerous customers, made the mistake of assuming Vader was merely another collector with deep pockets and unusual taste. "Deathly Hallows, you say?" Borgin's smile did not reach his eyes as he sized up his unusual visitor, searching for the telltale signs of wealth or influence. "A charming children's story, sir, though I confess I've had serious collectors inquire after such items before." "Then you know more than the fable," Vader said, his voice a mechanical rasp that seemed to lower the temperature of the cramped, artifact-crowded shop by several degrees. "Tell me what you know of the Elder Wand's current holder." Borgin's oily confidence flickered. "That, sir, is rather more delicate information." Vader did not raise his hand this time. He did not need to. The Force reached into the shelves lining the walls, and every cursed object in the shop began to rattle, shudder, and hum with barely restrained energy, as though something ancient within them recognized a will greater than their maker's intent. A locked cabinet in the back of the shop burst open on its own, spilling out artifacts that had not seen daylight in decades. "I did not ask you to weigh the delicacy of the information," Vader said. "I asked you to share it." Borgin, sweating now despite the shop's perpetual chill, spoke rapidly. Names spilled from him. Old wizarding families, historical duelists. Rumors passed down through generations. Of dark magic dealers who traded. As much in gossip as in cursed relics. Most of it was useless. But one thread caught Vader's attention. A name mentioned with peculiar reverence and fear in the same breath. Dumbledore. The old fool at Hogwarts is said to have bested Grindelwald in 45. Borgin said, unable to stop himself now that the flow of information had begun. Rumor in certain circles claims the wand he took from that duel was no ordinary wand at all. Nobody's proven it. Nobody's dared prove it. But if the Elder Wand exists in this generation, sir, my money's on Albus Dumbledore holding it. Vader absorbed this. Dumbledore, the same headmaster whose ripple of alarm he had sensed radiating from Hogwarts. Days earlier, the same figure the Aurors had spoken of with a mixture of respect and reliance. It would not be the first time Vader had needed to extract an answer from a powerful, principled adversary. The Jedi Council had taught him, long before his fall, precisely how such men thought, and precisely where their strength became a weakness the dark side could exploit. He left Borgin's shop without further violence, the shopkeeper's relief palpable and pathetic behind him. His next stop was less diplomatic. A network of informants, smugglers, minor dark wizards, even a disgraced former Auror trading secrets for protection, each contributed fragments to the picture forming in Vader's mind. The resurrection stone, some claimed, had been lost for generations, buried or destroyed. Its last known bearer a member of the ancient Gaunt family, now extinct in all but rumor in a filthy shack in a forgotten corner of the country. The cloak of invisibility, more elusive still, was said to remain within a single bloodline, the Potters, passed from father to son for centuries, though no one seemed to know its current whereabouts with any certainty. The Potters. Vader turned the name over in his processing thoughts, filing it beside the earlier revelation of the boy with the lightning scar, mentioned in half a dozen frightened whispers throughout his interrogations, a name spoken with the particular mixture of hope and dread reserved, in Vader's experience, for figures who occupied outsized significance in a society's collective mythology. He had known such figures before. He had been such a figure, once in a different galaxy, before the dark side reforged him into something else entirely. By the fourth night, Vader had assembled enough fragments to form a strategy, the Elder Wand, likely in Dumbledore's possession at Hogwarts. The cloak, tied to a bloodline, connected to the boy the wizarding world seemed to orbit around like a second sun. The stone lost, but perhaps not beyond recovery. If the Gaunt family's remaining properties yielded anything of value, Hogwarts, then, the castle would be his next destination, not through subtlety or diplomacy. Given his experience with this world's tendency toward violence rather than negotiation, but through direct confrontation, with the one man who seemed to sit at the center of every thread he had gathered. He did not yet sense the presence watching him from the shadows 2 streets over, a hooded figure who had trailed him at Voldemort's quiet command for the better part of 2 days, cataloging his movements, his methods, the terrible efficiency with which he extracted what he wanted from a world unprepared for him. Severus Snape, playing his customary role as double agent, observed with growing unease as the armored stranger moved through Nocturne Alley like a plague given purpose, and understood, with the particular clarity of a man who had spent his life reading dangerous people, that whatever this creature was, it represented a variable that could unbalance the war on either side of its ongoing calculations. He would report to Dumbledore before dawn. The headmaster needed to know their visitor was coming to Hogwarts, and he was coming for the Elder Wand. Snape's report reached Dumbledore's office just past 4 in the morning, delivered in clipped, urgent phrases between the fireplace's green flames. By the time the sun rose over the Hogwarts grounds, the headmaster had already summoned what remained of the Order's inner circle, along with After considerable internal debate, 3 additional attendees whose presence he had previously hoped to spare from this particular crisis: Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley. "You want us in this meeting?" Ron asked, glancing nervously between Dumbledore's grave expression and McGonagall's tight-lipped silence. "I want Harry in this meeting," Dumbledore corrected gently, "because the threads of this crisis have, whether by cruel coincidence or something far less accidental, begun weaving themselves around his family's legacy. Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley are here because Harry rarely faces difficult truths well without you both beside him, and because your counsel has proven valuable more times than I can easily count." Harry, 15, and already weary from a summer of nightmares and unexplained visions, felt a familiar cold dread settle in his stomach. "What's happened?" Dumbledore explained. "The arrival, the Ministry's failed confrontation, the interrogations spreading fear through Nocturne Alley, and finally, the stranger's apparent destination, Hogwarts itself, in pursuit of an artifact Dumbledore now confirmed, for the first time aloud to this gathered group, that he possessed. The Elder Wand," he said, drawing the weapon in question from within his robes, an old, gnarled length of elder wood that looked, to Harry's eyes, almost unremarkable compared to the legendary weapon of children's stories. "I took it from Gellert Grindelwald in 1945, though I confess I did not fully credit the old tales at the time. I believed myself simply to have won a very difficult duel against a very dangerous man. It was only in later years, studying its properties, that I came to suspect the truth. And now this thing wants it," Hermione said, her analytical mind already racing ahead. "Professor, what exactly is he? The Auror's reports don't make sense. No wand, but he deflects curses. A weapon of light that cuts through conjured stone. That's not magic as we understand it." "No," Dumbledore agreed. "It is not, which is precisely why I have spent the last several days researching every historical account of encounters with, let us say, forces beyond our conventional understanding of magic. I have found precious little that offers real guidance. Whatever this being's power is, it did not originate in our world, and it does not obey our world's rules in any way I can presently predict." Harry's scar gave a sudden, sharp throb, not the searing agony that usually accompanied Voldemort's strongest emotions, but a duller, more curious pulse, as though even his connection to the Dark Lord's mind sensed something shifting in the currents of the world around them. He pressed a hand to his forehead, and McGonagall noticed immediately. "Potter, I'm fine," Harry said, though the throb lingered uncomfortably. "It's just, I think Voldemort knows about him too. I think he's interested." Dumbledore's expression darkened further, though he said nothing to contradict Harry's instincts that had proven, time and again, uncomfortably reliable where Voldemort's mind was concerned. "This is what concerns me most," Dumbledore said. "Not merely that a being of tremendous, unknown power has entered our world seeking the Hallows, but that Voldemort, ever alert to opportunities that align with his own obsessions, may see in this stranger either a rival to be eliminated or an ally to be exploited. Either outcome serves us poorly." "So what do we do?" Ron asked. "Fight him. You saw what he did to a dozen trained Aurors." "Fighting him should be our very last resort," Dumbledore said. "I would prefer, if possible, to understand him first, to learn what drives his hunt for the Hallows, and whether reason might succeed where force so clearly failed the Ministry." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "But I would be lying if I told you I believed reason alone would suffice against a being capable of shattering wards a century in the strengthening, or deflecting the killing curse as though swatting away a curious insect." Hermione's expression sharpened with the particular intensity she reserved for problems she intended to solve through sheer diligence. "The cloak, Harry, your cloak. If the Hallows are real, and this creature is hunting all 3, doesn't that put you directly at risk?" The realization settled over the room with uncomfortable weight. Harry's father's cloak, passed down through generations of Potters, tucked away in his school trunk at this very moment, suddenly felt less like a convenient tool for midnight wandering and more like a target painted across his family's history. "Then we prepare," Dumbledore said, rising from his desk. with the weary resolve of a man who had faced too many wars to be surprised by the arrival of one more. Minerva, reinforce the castle's wards as best you're able, though I confess I hold little confidence they will meaningfully slow him if his power is even a fraction of what the Aurors describe. Severus, continue observing Voldemort's movements. I want warning the moment his attention turns from watching to acting. And Harry, his half-moon spectacles, caught the morning light as he turned to the boy, his expression unusually solemn. I want you to bring me that cloak. Not because I intend to take it from you, but because I believe, before this crisis resolves itself, you and I will need to discuss exactly what your family's legacy means, and precisely how much danger it now represents. Harry nodded, though the weight of the morning's revelations sat heavy in his chest. Somewhere beyond the castle's ancient walls, a being of terrible power was marching toward Hogwarts with single-minded purpose. And for the first time in his young life, Harry Potter found himself wondering whether Voldemort, monstrous, murderous Voldemort, might not, in fact, be the most dangerous thing hunting him this particular autumn. Voldemort's patience, as Lucius Malfoy had privately predicted, lasted exactly 4 days. It was Bellatrix who finally convinced him, not through argument. For arguing with the Dark Lord invited punishment rather than persuasion, but through carefully curated intelligence gathered by their network of watchers. The stranger, her reports indicated, was moving toward Hogwarts with clear intent, and once inside the castle's ancient wards, he would be considerably harder to observe, let alone intercept. If he reaches Dumbledore first, she argued, kneeling before Voldemort's chair with practiced deference, and if the old man proves more accommodating than we anticipate, we may find ourselves facing an alliance between the Order and this creature. My lord, we cannot allow that. Voldemort considered this in silence for a long moment, red eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the drawing room's walls. He had intended patience, careful observation, a measured approach to a variable he did not yet fully understand. But Bellatrix's warning carried weight. An alliance between Dumbledore and a being capable of shattering ministry wards was precisely the outcome he could least afford. Then we test him, Voldemort said finally, before he reaches the castle. Not to defeat him. I am not so arrogant as to believe a dozen Death Eaters could accomplish what a dozen Aurors could not. But to measure him, to understand the shape of his power before either alliance or war becomes inevitable. His gaze swept across the assembled Death Eaters gathered in his drawing room. Bellatrix, Rookwood, Dolohov, you three will intercept him on the road, north of Little Whinging, where our informants indicate he will pass tonight. Test his defenses. Do not attempt to kill him. I suspect that particular ambition would prove fatal to whoever attempted it. I want information, nothing more. Bellatrix's eyes gleamed with anticipation entirely disproportionate to the caution in her orders. That night, beneath a canopy of bare autumn trees along a quiet country road, Darth Vader sensed the ambush before it revealed itself. The Force stirred around him with the particular, prickling quality of malicious intent gathering in the darkness. 3 distinct signatures, each carrying that same corrupted, hungry quality he had first sensed in the ruins of Little Hangleton. Dark side energy, he understood now, however this world chose to name it. He did not slow his pace. He did not reach for his lightsaber. He simply continued walking, cloak billowing in the cold wind, allowing the ambush to spring exactly as its architects intended. Dolohov struck first, a violet curse lancing from the treeline with lethal precision, a spell capable of tearing through flesh and bone with silent, brutal efficiency. Vader's hand rose almost negligently, and the Force met the curse mid-flight, unraveling its structure the way a hand might crush a piece of parchment. The spell dissolved into harmless sparks. Clever, Vader observed, turning unhurried toward the treeline. But insufficient. Rookwood emerged next, more cautious than his companion, conjuring a wall of stone between himself and their target before, layering a barrage of curses over its top. Vader's crimson blade ignited, casting the dark road in hellish light, and he advanced through the barrage with the same inevitable, unhurried gait, deflecting each spell with contemptuous precision, his blade a blur of red that turned every curse aside as though he had studied This exact combat pattern 1,000 times before, which, in a sense, he had, across 100 battlefields in a galaxy far removed from this one. Then Bellatrix struck, and Vader understood immediately that this one was different from her companions. Not more powerful, precisely, but hungrier, her every spell laced with a manic, gleeful cruelty that reminded him, uncomfortably, of certain moments in his own dark past. She came at him not with a single devastating curse, but a relentless barrage, cutting hexes and bone-shattering curses, and, finally, when frustration overcame caution, the sickly green flash of the killing curse itself, hurled with genuine murderous intent. Vader caught it. Not deflected, caught. The killing curses, malevolent energy gathering into his outstretched palm and simply ceasing to exist, absorbed into the deeper well of dark side power that Vader had spent 2 decades cultivating. Bellatrix stared, her manic confidence flickering for the first time into something approaching genuine fear. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Your curse," Vader said, closing the distance between them with 3 unhurried strides. "Channels intent into death. I have channeled intent into death for longer than you have been alive, which you are a novice standing before a master, and you would do well to recognize the difference before it costs you everything." He did not kill her. Voldemort's orders, transmitted through the particular urgency in her attack pattern, had been clear enough for Vader to infer this was a test, not a true assassination attempt. Killing the Dark Lord's most devoted follower now would provoke a war he was not yet prepared to fight on 2 fronts, Dumbledore's faction and Voldemort's both. Instead, he used the Force to hurl her backward into a tree with bruising, breath-stealing force, then turned his attention to Dolohov and Rookwood, disarming both with brutal economy, snapping their wands with contemptuous ease before letting the Force fling them clear of the road entirely. "Return to your master," Vader said, his voice carrying across the ruined ambush site to where Bellatrix struggled upright, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. "Tell him I have measured his followers and found them wanting. Tell him that if he wishes to test me himself, I would welcome the opportunity to measure a true practitioner of the dark arts, rather than send children to die in his place." Bellatrix's fury warred with fear, but self-preservation won. She disapparated with a sharp crack, taking her battered companions with her, leaving Vader alone once more on the quiet country road. He extinguished his lightsaber and continued walking toward Hogwarts, filing away what he had learned. Voldemort possessed genuine dark side power, however this world chose to name it, and commanded followers capable of real, if limited, violence. More importantly, the Dark Lord had chosen observation and testing over immediate confrontation, a calculation of a strategist, not a fanatic. That made him more dangerous, not less. Somewhere ahead, Hogwarts waited, and with it, the Elder Wand, and the old man who had felt his arrival like a stone dropped into still water. Vader's pace did not slow. If anything, it quickened, the Force whispering ever more insistently that the true confrontation, the one that would determine the shape of this galaxy's newest war, drew closer with every step. Vader reached the boundary of Hogwarts wards at dusk 2 days later, and for the first time since his arrival in this galaxy, he paused before advancing. The wards themselves were formidable, layers upon layers of protective enchantment, woven across centuries by some of the most accomplished witches and wizards this world had ever produced. Anti-apparition fields, concealment charms, defensive barriers keyed to intent and identity in ways that reminded Vader, distantly, of the Islamary-based Force nullification technology the Empire had experimented with in isolated pockets of the galaxy. He extended his awareness outward, testing the wards. Structure the way he might probe a star, destroyer's shield, harmonics for weakness, and found, to his measured satisfaction, that they had been built to repel intruders relying on wands and conventional spellcraft. They had never accounted for something that used no wand at all. He walked through them as though they were mist. The castle rose before him against the darkening sky, ancient stone turrets catching the last light of sunset, hundreds of windows glowing warm and golden with candlelight, entirely unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, and simply resigned, of what approached its gates. Vader felt hundreds of young, untrained force-sensitive signatures scattered throughout the structure. Children, he understood. Students of magic still learning to wield the power that ran naturally through their blood. He felt no particular inclination toward violence against them. His purpose here was singular. Albus Dumbledore stood waiting at the castle's main entrance, alone, his half-moon spectacles reflecting the last traces of sunset. His wand, not the Elder Wand, Vader noted with interest, but an ordinary one, deliberately displayed, held loosely at his side in a gesture of calculated non-threat. "You have traveled a great distance to reach us," Dumbledore said as Vader approached, his voice carrying easily across the darkening courtyard, neither afraid nor falsely bold, simply present in the manner of a man who had faced too many dangerous things to waste energy performing courage he didn't need to manufacture. "I confess, I have spent several sleepless nights wondering what manner of being might command such power, without a wand at all. I am called Darth Vader," Vader said, stopping a dozen paces from the headmaster, close enough that the old wizard's protective enchantments, rings, amulets, subtle wardstones woven into his robes, registered clearly against Vader's force senses, each one a small, stubborn point of resistance. "I have not come to make war on your school, old man. I have come for the Elder Wand." If Dumbledore felt surprise at hearing the artifact named so directly, he did not show it. "May I ask why?" "My master seeks to conquer death," Vader said, the admission costing him nothing, for he had learned across 2 decades of service that honesty, deployed correctly, unsettled opponents far more effectively than threats. "He believes your galaxy's Hallows may offer the means. I am sent to acquire them, or the knowledge of how they function, and return them to him." "And what do you seek, Lord Vader?" Dumbledore asked, his blue eyes sharp despite their age, studying the black mask with an intensity that suggested he was searching for something beneath the armor, some flicker of the man Vader had once been, though Dumbledore had no way of knowing there had ever been a man there at all. "For I sense, beneath your master's ambition, something more personal driving you. Grief, perhaps, or regret." The words landed with unexpected weight. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the silence between them for 3 long cycles before he answered. "I seek nothing that concerns you, wizard. Only the wand. Everything concerns me when it walks toward my students, carrying the kind of power you carry." Dumbledore replied, gently but without yielding an inch. "I will not pretend I can stop you by force. Lord Vader, I have felt what you did to a dozen trained Aurors, and I have no illusions about my own limitations against a power I do not fully understand. But I will not simply hand you a weapon capable of ending any duel it enters, not without understanding first what you intend to do with it, and not without weighing what such power might mean in the hands of a master who seeks to conquer death itself." "Then we are at an impasse," Vader said. "Perhaps," Dumbledore said, "or perhaps this is an opportunity for something neither of us anticipated. When you fell from your sky 3 weeks ago, walk with me, Lord Vader. Let an old man ask you questions before violence forecloses every other possibility. I find, in my considerable experience, that even the most fearsome beings in this world or any other rarely arrived at their darkness without a story worth hearing first." Vader said nothing for a long moment, the Force swirling uneasily around him, some old and buried fragment of Anakin Skywalker responding, despite decades of suppression, to the quiet, patient wisdom in the old wizard's voice, a resonance he had not felt since the last time Obi-Wan Kenobi had looked at him with something other than fear or hatred. "You have 1 hour," Vader said finally, the words emerging with more effort than he cared to acknowledge. "Ask your questions, old man. But know that my patience and my master's both have limits, and that I did not travel between galaxies to be reasoned out of my purpose by pleasant conversation." Dumbledore inclined his head, something that might have been the ghost of a smile touching his weathered features. "An hour is more than I expected to receive. Come, let us see what wisdom this castle's history might offer a being who has traveled further than any visitor in its 1,000-year history." Together, improbably, they turned toward the castle's great doors, and behind the windows above, dozens of frightened students watched the headmaster walk beside the black-armored giant who had terrorized the ministry, wondering, as Harry Potter himself wondered, pressed against the cold glass of Gryffindor Tower with Ron and Hermione at his side, whether they had just witnessed the opening of a negotiation or the calm, deceptive prelude to the worst battle Hogwarts had ever seen. The hour Dumbledore requested stretched into 3, and what began as interrogation became, gradually, something closer to confession. They walked the castle's corridors as candlelight flickered across ancient portraits, Dumbledore asking questions with the patient precision of a man who had spent a lifetime coaxing truth from reluctant sources, and Vader answering more than he intended, more than he had spoken aloud in 20 years of service to the Emperor. He spoke of Anakin Skywalker without naming him directly, a boy who had loved too much and lost too completely, who had traded his humanity for power to save what he loved, only to lose it anyway. Dumbledore listened without judgment, and something in that listening cracked something in Vader that had been sealed since. Mustafar, you believe this wand, these Hallows, might undo what was done to you, Dumbledore said finally, as they reached the astronomy tower's base. Not merely serve your master's ambitions. Vader did not answer. He did not need to. The silence was answer enough. It was at that precise moment that the ward screamed. Voldemort's arrival tore through Hogwarts. Outer defenses with none of Vader's earlier subtlety, a violent, deliberate rupture. Dozens of Death Eaters operating onto the grounds in a coordinated assault. Dark marks blazing green against the night sky. Bellatrix's humiliation had apparently overcome her master's patience after all. Or perhaps Voldemort had simply concluded that 3 hours of Dumbledore's influence on his intended rival represented an unacceptable risk. He comes to claim what he believes is rightfully his, Dumbledore said grimly. Already moving, wand raised. The true nature of the weapon in his hand no longer a secret he could afford to keep. Lord Vader, whatever conclusions our conversation has reached, I would ask you to consider carefully whose side of this war you wish to stand on before the night ends. Vader's lightsaber ignited as he strode toward the courtyard, crimson light throwing long shadows across the ancient stones. I stand on my own side, wizard. I always have. The courtyard, when they reached it, had become a battlefield. Order members, Kingsley, Tonks, Moody, dual Death Eaters beneath a sky lit by spellfire, while professors rushed students toward the castle's deeper sanctuaries. And at the center of the chaos stood Voldemort himself, robes billowing, red eyes fixed with terrible intensity on the black-armored figure descending the tower steps toward him. So, Voldemort said, his voice carrying easily across the battlefield's roar. The stranger who humbled my followers finally shows himself. Your followers were insufficient, Vader replied, closing the distance between them with unhurried, inevitable steps. You send children to test what you fear to test yourself. I fear nothing, Voldemort hissed, though the flicker in his crimson eyes suggested otherwise. I merely calculate, and my calculations suggest we are, perhaps, not so different. You and I, both of us seeking to conquer what should be unconquerable, both of us willing to sacrifice everything for power beyond death's reach. I sought love once, Vader said, and something in his mechanical voice carried an old, buried grief that made even Dumbledore, watching from the tower steps, go still. I destroyed myself trying to save it. You have never loved anything, Tom Riddle. You have only ever feared your own ending. That is not the same hunger. It will never grant you the same power. Voldemort's face contorted with fury at the sound of his birth name. Enough. His wand snapped up, and the killing curse erupted between them, brilliant and merciless. What followed would be spoken of in Hogwarts history for generations. Vader's crimson blade met the curse, and, rather than deflecting it as he had every previous casting, drove through it. The Force and the Dark Lords. Ancient magic colliding in a detonation of green and red light that shattered windows across 3 floors of the castle. Voldemort, staggered but far from finished, unleashed a barrage of the darkest curses in his considerable arsenal, flesh-rending hexes, bone-crushing force, spells that had ended 100 lives before this one, each one met by Vader's blade or turned aside by a wall of force-born will that made the very air shimmer with barely contained power. They fought across the courtyard, magic against the dark side made manifest. And for the first time in either combatant's memory, neither found an easy advantage. Voldemort's mastery of dark magic proved genuinely formidable. Decades of study and murder distilled into spellcraft that tested even Vader's considerable defenses. But Vader's raw command of the Force, honed across a galaxy of war, matched curse for curse, blow for blow, until finally, in a moment of desperate calculation, Voldemort did the one thing his pride had never before permitted. He fled, not defeat. Precisely, Voldemort would never call it that, but a tactical disapparition executed a half-second before. Vader's blade would have found his throat, leaving behind only the echo of a promise hissed through gritted teeth. This is not finished, stranger. Nothing between us is finished. The battlefield fell suddenly, eerily silent. Death Eaters fleeing in their master's wake. Order members lowering wands with exhausted disbelief. Vader stood alone amid the wreckage of the courtyard, lightsabers still humming, and turned to find Dumbledore watching him with an expression that mixed relief, wariness, and something almost like hope. "You could have let him strike me first," Dumbledore observed quietly. "You did not. I have decided," Vader said, extinguishing his blade, "that the wand you carry and the war you fight no longer interest me as tools for my master's ambition." He paused, something shifting in the set of his shoulders. That had nothing to do with armor and everything to do with a choice 20 years in the making. "I find, old man, that I am tired of serving power that only ever costs me more than it returns." The days following Voldemort's retreat brought a strange, uneasy quiet to Hogwarts, and within it, Darth Vader made a choice that would echo across 2 galaxies for years to come. He did not take the Elder Wand. Dumbledore offered it to him on the 3rd day, laid across open palms in the headmaster's tower. A genuine test of the man Vader claimed to have become. Vader looked at the ancient weapon. For a long moment, the artifact that had cost this world countless lives across centuries of ambition and murder. The prize his emperor had sent him across dimensions to claim, and shook his head. "Power passed hand to hand through betrayal," he said, "only ever demands another betrayal to keep it. I have paid that price once, in a war I no longer wish to name. I will not pay it again for a master who sees me as nothing more than a useful weapon." Instead, he asked Dumbledore for something far stranger: passage, if such a thing could be arranged, through whatever ancient magic this world possessed, to remain, not as conqueror, not as servant, but as something entirely unprecedented. An outsider seeking a third path between the empire he had fled and the war. Voldemort seemed determined to escalate regardless of any single battle's outcome. Dumbledore, ever perceptive, understood the deeper request beneath the words. "You will not find redemption here simply by refusing one wand, Lord Vader. But I suspect you already know that." "I know," Vader said, "that for the first time in 20 years, I chose something because it was right, not because it was demanded of me. That will have to be enough for now." The rift that had brought him here remained sealed. The Emperor's technology stranded. On the far side of dimensions, Vader no longer possessed the means to cross, whether by design or consequence. He found himself truly exiled, neither Sith nor Jedi, neither ally nor enemy to the war still simmering beneath Britain's calm surface, waiting for Voldemort's inevitable return with a patience that mirrored, uncomfortably, the man he had once been before Mustafar remade him. Harry Potter, watching from the courtyard as the black-armored stranger walked the grounds in contemplative solitude, understood something the wizarding world would spend years debating: that some monsters, given an unexpected mirror, might glimpse a version of themselves worth becoming instead. Whether Vader would honor that glimpse, or whether old loyalties and older darkness would eventually reclaim him, remained a question only time, and the war still to come, would answer. May the Force be with you.